This Week's Game.
Episode 2, February 1st, 2014. This Week's Game is a 10 to 15 minute weekly gaming podcast with recurring segments. This week we're going to have an elevator pitch on Scraps, which is a really interesting, customizable vehicular combat game. The main loop is going to be a discussion on Gone Home. We're going to take a very quick look at Novus AEterno. Apologies to them, as you'll find out later. And we'll end with a rant on the Global Game Jam website and its shortcomings. But first, as always, is our elevator pitch.
Hi, I'm Bill Borman, and I'm currently developing a game called Scraps. Scraps is a vehicle combat game where you build your vehicle from the chassis up. If you've played the likes of Interstate 76 or Twisted Metal, you'll have a reasonable idea of the basic gameplay here, but the big difference is that there's a lot more creative freedom to build whatever terrible designs you can come up with. The vehicle parts have real functions, they're not just cosmetic, and each affects the weight distribution of the vehicle, so if you want to build something that falls over every time it fires its guns or whatever, then you're free to do that. The game's currently in development, there's an early builder demo that you can download now, and the alpha release with multiplayer is coming soon.
To find out more about Scraps, check out ThisWeeksGame.com. So, Martin, again, this week we're going to be talking about Gone Home, which I have not played, I just know of it. But you seem to have been super impressed with it. So
I just played through it last night, and I opened it up for the second time. I had opened it for maybe a minute before, and whatever reason didn't continue. And so I opened it up last night because Broken Age was updating, and I wasn't gonna wait for it. So I opened up Gone Home. It's just been on my list, and it's super powerful.
How long was the playthrough for you?
About 2.5 hours.
Okay, so yeah,
I think there might have been a couple breaks in there, but yeah, it's not long really. I was actually talking with someone. There are a few different kind of questions and what might be considered storylines that you're sort of uncovering. That's the interesting thing about this game is that it's pure. It's not pure, but it's almost pure narrative. Like your compulsion to keep playing is really just uncovering bits of story, and so it's the closest thing I could possibly compare it to would be to Myst. Like there's a few puzzles that are almost Myst-like, but really the puzzles are just to uncover the next bit of story, and like the puzzle and actually like puzzles is putting it pretty strongly. Like there were more things like you find bits of paper, little scraps of paper that have her locker combination on them, and then you can open the locker.
That's like very Misty.
Yeah, not even really a puzzle though, So yeah, you're exploring this house and uncovering narrative, and that's really the whole thing. That's the experience. And for me, it was super powerful because so the main story, there's a few others, but the main one is finding out where your sister is. So you're coming home from being abroad for an indefinite amount of time, which I guess some people do, but it seemed weird to me. Like you get home and it just happens to be, you don't know this at the time, but of course it just happens to be while your sister and your parents are away from the house.
Right.
And so there's a bit of like, is it a supernatural kind of a thing? Like the house is clearly got some baggage, some history. Like kids at the sister's school think that it's haunted, or that it's like that it's haunted, I guess.
Right. I don't want to get too much into the spoilers.
I'm not gonna spoil it.
But I do want to talk about the the setting in which it's in. Is obviously the environment tells a lot of story, and nothing's going to have more character than a family home. I understand that you play one of the two daughters. I'm more aware of it, like you said. It was before we started rolling. It was an IGF nominee, and I remember going, "Oh, that looks kind of interesting." And it's in this kind of emerging genre of like first-person narrative storytelling. That sounded very Misty, what you were saying, but also I'm thinking of like Dear Esther and Stanley Parable and stuff like that, where it's really about your connection to the story. And the premise sounded really interesting, and as soon as I found out that it took place in the 90s, I was like, oh, okay, so that makes sense that they have an answering machine. Yep. Like it seems like they were able to focus in on using those kind of tropes of 90s life to work it into the story, and also just not have, it's like, you couldn't really do the X-Files today, because it'd be like, well, just get on your cell phone and call somebody. It was kind of the perfect era to be insulated or to be isolated like that in an environment.
And there's tapes too, tape decks.
Oh, actual tapes? Like physical magnetic tape?
Yeah, that are mixtapes. Like some, this like the daughter is the sister is in high school, so she's like got mixtapes that people have made for her and stuff. Like and you discover
mixtapes. We're old enough to remember that.
Yeah, and hilariously, like I was, like when there were these puzzles. I mean, there really are probably like 2 or 3 things that you discover that you can't get into right away, and so you're trying to figure out how you can do it, and that's not the emphasis of the story at all. But I started reading into everything. I'm looking at the tape deck. One of the tape covers, you can examine them pretty closely. So like there's numbers of the tracks, and they're all numbered, and then some of them are red and some are black, just like because it was handwritten, and stuff. And I'm like, ooh, that's got to be the combination. So I go and try it. Like, no, it's not the combination. It's just design.
Oh, so there's a lot of opportunity for you to kind of like read your own personality into the environment and into the things.
Maybe, yeah. So it's funny because the tapes are really just ambient. They're just like you find these tapes in different rooms. There's probably like 6 of them, maybe just 4. I don't know, some number. And then you play them, and they're just a soundtrack. They're just a song.
It's just the background.
Yeah. And the answering machine that you discover right away, that's like right in the foyer of the house, is probably the only other thing like that, where you trigger as a sound, like you trigger something that like happens in the environment, and you that reveals more story. Whereas the bulk of the story is delivered through either like discovering paper and reading the papers, or if you discover these key items that are like delivering the actual narrative. So like, and it's a bunch of different things. Like sometimes it's a note that you've discovered, or sometimes it's just getting into I don't think it's ever getting into a room for the first time. It's usually you actually find a thing and you pick it up, and then you start to hear a journal entry from your sister.
Right, I'd seen some footage of people playing it where they get the journal entry from your sister, and from what I gather, the emotional connection that they try to draw between you and your sister is very well established throughout the game.
It's really incredible. Yeah, they do a great job. I mentioned on Twitter that I cried at the end.
Yeah, I know. You said you still had what was it? Moist cheeks.
My cheeks were wet.
Yeah. Without getting too spoilery, can you discuss how or why it was able to reach you in a way that most games won't? If we, for those of us who are old enough, we'll think back to like the first Electronic Arts ad, and you remember like the first line was, "Can a video game make someone cry?" And they were trying to figure out, can we elevate games to the level of art form that it could make somebody cry? And we've seen that. We've had a few lately that have had some
for sure
some real profound implications for me, and particularly my wife and I. At the end of one game, we're just sitting there just blinked at the screen for like 2 minutes, and then we're like, wow. So we're starting to actually see that.
Yeah. What was that?
That was Infinite, actually, Bioshock Infinite.
Okay.
That was not... It was also one of those ones where even the people who had finished it before me were not willing to tell me the end. Like, they wanted me to be surprised by it. And I'm actually hinting, can you give us some kind of that without giving the ending away?
What I will say is that there are different kinds of crying, and I am like a real... Like, I hate tearjerkers. I don't like when people are playing with my emotions and twisting them around. What gets me every time, though, is the ending that's so happy that I cry. Yeah. And that was actually, it's that time. It's not like I'm crying because it's so sad. I'm not crying because somebody's baby died. I'm crying because it's like this, just such an impactful and powerful ending.
It's a powerful emotion.
Yeah.
And
that, so I won't go into why. Because I think that would be...
On that note, what other games have had an impact similar to that to you?
I can't think of a single game,
there's just
to
really
be honest.
None that have really gotten me to that point. I'm going to give that a shot. There's some that have really shocked me and been like, wow, it was like Infinite's another one where seriously when it ended we were just like, wow, that was really good. Similar to the end of there's some really good, Super 8 was a movie that when we saw, we weren't expecting it to be that good, but when it ended we were like, that was really good, right? It was a very similar ending, but no interactive experience so far has really pushed me to that edge. It's really cool. A lot of people that I've talked to about this game, they've said that they're like, you absolutely have to play it. Yeah, it's amazing. It'll get you in the gut, so I'm absolutely going to now. But it's really kind of excellent that came out of like a much smaller scale project, you know, more of an indie space, and it wasn't one of the, like, you know, Ghosts isn't going to make anybody cry. The Call of Duty Ghosts, it's not going to do it. Battlefield, from what I gather, Battlefield made some people cry.
You know, but
not
like,
because it was supposed to, just because it was
just
a
like,
bad
oh
game.
my god, yeah. No, I mean, you know, if they wanted to, they certainly have the budget to do that. You know, like they could be messing with our emotions, and it's really interesting that they deliberately choose not to. I think there's some. I mean, BioShock is interesting in that, you know, it's a little bit more narrative driven, and they, you know, they could be going that direction. I don't know if they really did. Well, I mean, I guess it kinda, but
it wasn't a cathartic experience the way that you're talking about. It was just more of a, wow, I didn't see that coming. That was cool.
Okay.
It wasn't like, oh, I'm feeling a lot of emotion. It was just, okay, let me process that.
Yeah.
You know, it was certainly not to the same depths of didn't speak to the same depths of the human experience. But hopefully we'll be seeing more games like that coming out from the indie space, and hopefully we'll be discussing more of them as time allows.
Yeah.
Thank you. Novus AEterno is a very large-scale RTS MMO focusing on user-generated content, and I did an interview with Nick, the CEO of Taitio Studios, who's making the game, but unfortunately the software crashed while I was saving that audio, so I wasn't able to get it into the main loop this week, but definitely check them out. They've got a really cool concept. Personalized crafting looks really awesome. Check them out online. They've exceeded their funding goals on Kickstarter. It looks really cool.
Doesn't the Global Game Jam website suck? It's pretty much okay for browsing titles and thumbnails of projects, but that's about it. If I want to find a game to actually download and play, I have to go to the game's detail page to see if there's a play link, and if not, then maybe there's a project download, and then what's that, a zip? I gotta download it and see if there's anything playable there. This essentially means clicking through all 4,293 games just to see which ones can be played. That's ridiculous. Pretty much what's there is filtering by country, tools and technologies, diversifier, or platform. Country, useless. I don't care what country your game was made in. I only care if I can play it in English, which happens to be the only language I can speak. Tools and technologies, that's cool. I mean, I definitely want to see that, but they're the sponsors? Like, these like where's Xcode? Where's Eclipse? I don't know. It's just completely dumb. Diversifiers, that's great. I love the diversifiers in the Game Jam. That just adds a great element, like something else to strive for. If you think the theme sucks, you know, like there's just, that's great. Don't get me wrong, those are great. But, I mean, what's the 1890-something one? Like, I mean, I think maybe 1% of those games could have been played back in 1890, whatever. I just, you know, it's like, it's completely fictional. So anyway, the problem with platforms, similar. I'm looking for games made for iPhone, iPad. Maybe 10% of them are playable on that platform. So if they added tags and then maybe just allowed people to easily say, yes, I agree with this tag, like a little arrow or something right next to it, like that would be super helpful. And then if there was always a playable yes, no right away, like, I mean, I just think user ratings are the way to go here, because we would quickly see what games are actually playable on the Global Game Jam website. And isn't that what we want to see? I mean, these are games. We're looking at games. We want to play the games. I want to play the games. Maybe it's just me. So there's, you know, I know our IGDA has, like, there's a thread we've been talking back and forth about, like, oh, hey, where do I go to find the games that are playable? You know, there's some reviews that are starting to come out, like, you know, people are making their lists of, like, oh, my favorite games were the Global Game Jam last weekend. I'm hoping we'll see more of that in the next few weeks. But it's really a shame that we can't get that information, or at least some of that information, out of the Global Game Jam website. But on the plus side, at least it didn't go down a million times like it did last year on Sunday while everyone was uploading their projects.
Patch notes for this week. I want to thank Martin Greider again for both participating in discussion about Gone Home and also providing the excellent commentary on the Global Game Jam website. As always, everything will be on ThisWeeksGame.com. Follow me at DevChannel on Twitter. If you know of something that we should check out, let me know, and we'll see if we can get it in.